Good afternoon. My name is Jennifer Homendy, and I'm a board member with the National Transportation Safety Board. With me today is Dan Bauer, who's a senior investigator with our Major Investigations Division of our Office of Aviation Safety. Today is our first full day on the scene, and our entire team has arrived. Our investigator in charge, which is Bob Gretz, is actually still on the scene and couldn't join me today. But I think a lot has been accomplished today. And I'm going to go through some of those things. First, we've requested a lot of documents. We've requested inspection and maintenance records of the propellers, the airframe, and all four engines. We are able to determine from the information, the preliminary information that we've received, is that the last major inspection was conducted in January of 2019. That inspection is called a continuous airworthiness inspection. From there are requirements to have progressive inspections. Think of it a lot like a car where you would have service at 10,000, 20,000, 30,000 miles. This would be inspections and maintenance at 25 hours, 50 hours, 75 hours, and 100 hours, and then it would start all over again. What I will say is we've received a lot of that information. We have not analyzed that information. That's for a later time. So we do not know the quality of those inspections. We don't know if there were any issues identified, and we will be looking into that as part of the investigation. Additionally, we've requested training records for the flight crew and others that worked on the plane. We have requested a transcript from the FAA of conversations between the flight crew and air traffic control. In addition, we received a number of witness photos and videos. Thank you to the public for sending those in. Those were very helpful, so we were able to start to go through some of those. We also obtained an airport security video, and that was helpful because we were able to determine from that the time of impact between the airplane and the de-icing facility, which was at about 9:53 a.m. So the preliminary information is telling us that the plane took off. I've seen 9:45 and 9:47, but around 9:45, we know that the flight crew radioed the tower around 9:50, and we know that impact between the airplane and the de-icing facility was now around 9:53 a.m. Our investigators began interviewing other pilots with the Collings Foundation. A lot of those pilots are volunteer pilots, so those interviews are continuing, and we'll have a number of other interviews that we are scheduling. We also conducted an initial exam of the wreckage. We are aware that the pilot radioed air traffic control and stated there was an issue with one of the engines. We identified that engine in the wreckage, and we secured it for further examination. We also moved part of the wreckage, which was resting on top of a de-icing fluid tank at the de-icing facility. We conducted a fuel sample of the tank in the right wing of the airplane, and the fuel, we believe, was 100 low-lead aviation gas. We also walked the path the plane took once it made contact with the ground. And we looked at ground scars. Those are marks on the ground from anything that may have hit the ground. And other witness marks. There are a number of lighting poles out there, so we looked at those as well to see what witness marks were on those. We were able to determine that the plane made contact with the approach lights at about 1,000 feet from runway 6, or the threshold of runway 6, and had hit in some way about 30 approach lights, which are on breakaway poles. We used the drone to begin mapping the plane's path to its final resting location. And tomorrow we begin to document and move the wreckage. And what I mean by document is there will be a number of photos taken, and our investigators will start to they'll write down descriptions of what they see that is part of the wreckage. Now, a little bit about the aircraft. I wanted to give you more background on the aircraft, its accident history, and just talk about accident history of World War II era bombers. As I mentioned, the tail number is November 93012. According to FAA records, it's a Boeing B-17G. There are 16 Boeing B-17Gs that are registered in the United States right now. The airplane was manufactured in 1944, and it's powered by 4 piston-driven engines. It was purchased by the Collings Foundation in 1986. It was involved in 1 accident and 1 incident. The 1 accident, NTSB investigated in 1987, where it overran a runway in Pennsylvania. It was also involved in 1 incident in 1995 that we did not investigate in Nebraska, and that's where a landing gear failed to deploy. Since 1982, the NTSB has investigated 21 accidents involving World War II era bombers. 3 of those involved B-17Gs, and that does not include this one because we don't have the final numbers. Of those 21 accidents, those resulted in 23 fatalities and 1 injury. So with that, I just want to remind folks to monitor our progress at NTSB_newsroom. Before I ask for questions, I do want to thank the Connecticut Airport Authority and the Connecticut State Police and others for their continued support. It's been phenomenal. I will take questions if you could raise your hand and state your name and your affiliation. Yes.
Karen from Fox 61. These piston engines, can you speak to the reliability of those in relation to a modern day engine?
Want to take that?
As long as they are maintained properly, then they're very reliable, and there's certainly plenty other aircraft flying these type of engines.
It's my understanding, though, that with these piston engines, there's a vibration that happens from the rods and cylinders that move up and down that would make it less reliable than a rotating engine. Is that the case?
Right.
I don't think we're at any point to make that determination. That's why we're going to be removing the engines for further examination.
Yeah.
Matt Austin with NBC Connecticut. Can you talk about your impression, having seen now the wreckage? How much of the plane is left?
There are significant pieces of the plane left. We have tires, we have both wings, we have all 4 engines, and then the tail and several pieces of the plane. There was significant fire damage, however, and damage to 2 of the buildings at the de-icing facility, damage to 1 of the tanks, and damage to 2 trucks. Chris.
Chris Manley, CBS News. One, if I could you just run through the World War II era bomber numbers again, but also can you do you have a sense for where the survivors were sitting in the airplane? There's been talk of one of them opened a hatch to help other people get out. Can you give us some information if you were able to tell where that happened?
The question is, where were there survivors on the plane, and if I could run through the World War II era bomber accident information. Since 1982, and that's really when the NTSB began collecting information in a database. So since 1982, the NTSB has investigated 21 accidents involving World War II era bombers. 3 of those were B-17Gs. It does not include this accident. Of those 21 accidents, those resulted in 23 fatalities and 1 injury. Now, that 1 injury was actually involving this aircraft back in a previous incident. As far as where the survivors were in the aircraft, we don't have information at this time on that, but that's something we'll be developing as part of the investigation. Yes.
Tina Patel, News 8, ABC. Is there any indication that more than one of the engines was not working or not when it was before the crash?
The question is, was one of the engines not working? More than one. Well, we're not ruling anything out. We heard audio, and this is why we rely on the transcript. We heard audio of communications between the pilot and air traffic control of a problem with the engine. We have to determine, was that 1, was that 2? We don't know, or 3 or 4, we don't know at this time. But obviously that's something we want to look into because of reports. Yes.
Emily with NBC News. Going off of what she asked, not only there was some people said that they were looking at something in the plane before it had even taken off. There was some issue with the plane. Are you guys looking into that? Do you have any information about that?
We've heard reports of that, but that's not anything that we can confirm yet. We do have questions, and we'll be asking those very questions as part of our interview process. Yes.
Christina Hager from WPZ Boston. Back to those numbers you were giving on the World War II bombers that you've investigated in the past. Can you put that into context? From what you've seen, is how safe is this aircraft, this particular type of bomber, as far as its history?
The safety of the bomber, we have to look at that as part of our investigation. I mean, every accident is different. And when we look at these past accidents, they're all different scenarios. So we have to look at this one independently, and then we'll take a look at the history and make appropriate recommendations. So we don't have anything at this time.
Can you speak to how unusual this is?
We just know that there were 21 accidents. So, yes.
When the plane hit these approach lights that you mentioned, is that enough to bring the plane down itself, or you said it veered to the right? Is that enough to make it veer? What role did those approach lights being hit play?
The question is, what role does the approach lights play in the accident scenario itself? We know that the pilot radioed that there was concern with the airplane and then circled back around to runway 6. We know that there was impact about 1,000 feet out from the threshold of the runway. But that's obviously something we're going to look at as part of the investigation is, did hitting any of this play a role? We do know that from some of the witness marks and some of the video that the plane was at one point a bit right wing down. So.
I would assume the breakaway poles are meant to do just that, not to damage, but to break away.
The breakaway poles, are they meant to break away? Yes, they are meant to break away. That is how they are designed.
Mark Sudol with News 12 Connecticut. Can you tell yet were there enough seats and safety belts for the passengers?
The question is, can we tell if there are enough seats and safety belts for the passengers? That's something we need to look at as part of the investigation as we start looking at the wreckage and then conducting interviews from previous flights and others. As well as safety briefings. We're going to want to look at what safety briefings were conducted pre-flight and during the flight. Yes?
Have you determined if it was the right fuel on board?
We have had, the question is, was it the right fuel on board? We asked based on reports of it being certified for 87. was 100 appropriate? And the FAA has documents that state that anything above 87 would be appropriate, anything below would not be. But still, we are conducting testing to make sure there's no debris, to check the quality of the fuel and others. Yes?
Hi, Shante Passmore with WFSB. Can you share if either the co-pilot or the engineer were certified to fly?
We have some preliminary information on the crew. I know that the crew, so the pilot had, or the captain, had flown for the foundation for over 20 years. At the time of the crash, he had over 7,300 hours in the B-17, and reportedly has the highest time in the United States in a B-17. He was also the safety officer for the foundation. The first officer was a volunteer for the foundation for 5 years, and then there was a loadmaster on board. Yes?
Jill Hoffman, New England Public Radio. In your past investigation since the early 80s into these types of planes, was there any thread that connects any of the crashes in the equipment itself?
Your question is, was there any thread or similarity between this accident and previous accident investigations we've conducted on World War II era bombers? That is part of our accident investigation, where we will look at, is there any link to any previous accident that investigation that we've conducted involving these bombers? So that's something we'll have to look at down the road. Right now, our main goal is to focus on the perishable evidence, the things that will go away when we leave the scene. We can look at that when we leave the scene. What we want now is to look at the ground marks, the witness marks. We want to look at the wreckage. We want to document the wreckage, whether that's photos, written description of the wreckage, everything that might go away. That's what we're looking at, our total focus right now. All of that is for later, and that's part of analysis.
Is there anything, though, that is appearing that the NTSB would recommend these planes not go into air immediately, as of today? Is there anything from past knowledge?
The question is there anything right now that we believe would indicate that these should not be flying? It's too early for that, for the NTSB to make that determination. We're still at the very initial stages of this investigation, and we'll have to determine that at the appropriate time, if applicable at all.
Forgive me for not knowing more about this. I'm Mark Burkham with the Hartford Current, but you mentioned that it was leaded fuel. Is that a leaded fuel specific to vintage internal combustion engine airplanes, or is that a leaded fuel that is in wide use?
That's for wide use.
Yeah, why don't you?
Not 100% sure, but I believe that's a widely used fuel for internal combustion type engines.
How does it compare to the fuel that that plane was designed to run on?
It was originally able to run on 87 octane, but higher octane is fine in these types of engines. FAA said that's fine for higher octanes run in these engines.
But you mentioned the lead. How does the lead value
It's actually
be lower now compared to what it was designed to run on?
anything that's running in these airplanes has been certified for use by the FAA.
Thank you.
Yep.
One more question?
Chris?
Just real quick. Are you aware of some accounts from people who, before the plane took off, that there was an engine issue before the plane took off that they were working on prior to takeoff?
Am I aware of accounts from witnesses that there may have been issues with the engine prior to takeoff? The answer to that is yes. We do have witness statements, not official statements, but some things that have been sent in to witness@ntsb.gov that have stated they saw work being conducted on one or two engines prior to takeoff. So that is a question we have both for the Collings Foundation and for other pilots.
Thank you.
Thank you.